brake servo, and you can see how that sits there. I used a slightly longer arm, but as you can see, because the tank is going to sit up here, you cannot use an arm that gets the servo linkage to stick up higher outside of these blocks. So that's the air there coming down and going up, and that's about as much as it'll go. As you can see here, we're right up against the former there. And it's coming along. We have all the cables coming from the back. We have our connector right here, and that wiring is sort of tucked underneath the fuselage there. You can see it and run all the way to the front. So here's the wing harness. Wing harness is right here. We have the air brake harness here. We have the harness coming from the back. We have all the gear, lights, and brake harness right there. And this red guy is the gear door harness. And that's also on the other side, same group of harnesses. Here's a better shot of the wiring harness for the wing, and you can see how that comes through the former work, and it's chafe protected and runs through to the front. So right there is the gear. This side is the front of the plane. That is the back. And basically, what happens here is, let's get the camera across, is that I just secure that wire down with a zip tie and a clamp so that it is out of the way of the gear, and run it forward. And so here you can see these are the gear door servos, and this is the red wire that I was showing from the top of the aircraft. So wiring is coming along pretty well. The wire clears. The gear, there's not going to be any interference, and it's well hidden. The gear doors and the gear covers will also clear. And so we have this giant mess of wires here that we're going to organize. So basically, the way I did this is, these are the control surface wires, and you can see them on both sides right here. There's some control surfaces that come through the harness that I just showed plugs the rear fuselage to the rest of the fuselage, and specifically the rudder and the elevator that's on the left actually come to this side. So this entire bundle of wires is going to be wired up to the gyro system. So still a bit messy. I'm going to try and clean this up. I've tried to do some cleanup. Our wires are sort of organized. They're also labeled correctly. So for example, these are all my lighting wires. Light control is going to go somewhere in here. And here's my gear wires and brake wires with the MR30. I think that's what that connector is called. And then obviously all the wiring coming from the front, tied down, and chafe protected. So that's another thing I'd like to mention here, is that especially when these wires come through the former work, the stuff is sharp, and it's got carbon fiber on the opposite sides of it, so it's important to chafe protect wires. So we're doing that. Currently where we're at with the wiring on the XXL L-39, I finally decided the placement, landing gear controller, smooth flight, and you can see the screens for everything is laid out on sort of the left side of the aircraft, assuming that it's going to be operated by someone standing on the right side. And all my wires that are here, some of them have been plugged in, so the basic stuff on the gear controller, just not on the smooth flight because I need to program that. But also, here's all the wires going to the back. You can see that everything is wrapped in snakeskin, and that's just because it's a large model and there's wood formers here, as I've mentioned before, and that needs to be protected from chafing. Just because I'm assuming or imagining that as this flies around it, and there's a lot of cable, there's a good chance that they'll get thrown around. So it's good to chafe protect them and then cinch them down, secure them so that these don't move as much. So in terms of the wires going to the back, you can see everything is nice and secured, laid out, and they go through the underside of the jet to the back. I also reinforced the wing tube here with carbon fiber, and that's just at the advice of the factory. They suggested to do this. I'm assuming that the newer versions will already come with that applied. Nothing unusual here, just the wires for the turbine. We're going to be going with the KingTech 320, so all those wires have just been laid out and brought to the back. Obviously I will determine what needs to be secured, where they're going to be secured to the fuselage once I have the turbine mounted, and I can better decide what I want to do with those wires. This is how the UAT is going to sit here. The pump is going to sit all the way in the front, and the reason I did this is because one of the things that I'm super concerned about on this big jet is interference, either from turbine noise, which is acoustic, or EMI. So this is a pretty big motor, and I did not want it close to my smooth flight gyro at all. So these things tend to work really well when they're separated away because of inverse square laws of how noise travels. So that is the reason why the pump is put way far away from the smooth flight. So that's at least maybe 2 feet or 1.5 feet. And then the smooth flight is almost, I'm gonna say, 5 or 6 or 7 feet away from where the turbine is gonna be, so that there's less chance of that interference. These are just some of the things that go through my head as I'm building this. So we're gonna eventually wire up or plumb the UAT, and you can see from the UAT to the pump is gonna be a nice short run, and because this is a big pump and the fuel is gonna be under pressure, then we're gonna have a long run from the pump all the way back to the turbine, which is gonna be sitting behind that. But that should be fine because that part of the fuel is sort of under pressure. What you can see here is we added these 2 trays that we bought from Amazon, and that's what's going to be holding our batteries in place, and they're labeled. So we're going to separate the gear from the smooth flight just because I want the option to be able to go to a higher voltage in the event that 2S is not enough, because the gear in this plane are pretty big. So we have the XT60L connectors there for gear and for the smooth flight, and those wires just get neatly routed into the airframe, and eventually you can see they're coming in through there and they make it up to the gear controller, and in this case just one side of the smooth flight. So this gear controller, the LGC19, actually has a regulator, and you can see that it says there regulated servo voltage output. So that's why I want to separate the voltage. Usually I would just power this controller directly from the smooth flight, but in the event that we need to go to like a 3S life or something like that, because this guy has a regulator, it'll keep these guys at 6 volts, and only my gear and brakes will be pushed up to the input voltage. So that's what I'm doing there. The second battery bay on the L-39, and you can see we have our second smooth flight battery that goes all the way in the front, and then right next to it is where I expect the turbine battery to mount. And I glued this piece of plywood in here with a Dean's plug, and it's labeled turbine 3S life. And so the idea here was to use CA so that if I ever need to knock this out, it's just gonna like fall off, but it's secured in place strong enough that I can plug a battery in and unplug without any issues. I think I'm gonna just start plugging things in and making sure the gear controller is programmed, making sure the smooth flight's programmed, making sure the flight surfaces work appropriately, and then we will finish off the plumbing. So what's left in the plumbing is basically really just the pump to the UAT, and then obviously installing the turbine. We are testing the flight surfaces on the L-39, and as we can see here, most of the stuff is plugged in. What's left is the elevators, rudder, throttle, this is the elevator and the air brake. But for the most part, the flight surfaces and the lights seem to work well. So here the flaps, they seem to be working really well, and aileron as well. And it's the same story on the other side. You can see the flaps working just fine. And I will have to finesse these once I get there. The lights also seem to be working, so you can see the strobes are strobing, and the lights there are on. So the reason these are not attached to the landing lights is just because there's not really enough ports on the light controller. But I know these are technically supposed to come on with the gear, but we're gonna leave them just on until we figure out how we want to attach them to the gear. Speaking of the light controller, there it is. I really forgot to share a video of this, but there is where the light controller is attached, and off of the light controller you get sort of a couple of wires. So you get one wire that goes to your gear and one wire that's supposed to go to switching on and off, and you can see those two wires are basically what's wrapped together in this spiral wrap right here. Let's see if I can show that. So that's those wires, and what those go into is the smooth flight controller. And basically with those two wires going into the smooth flight, and that's what is labeled here, light controller, allows you to turn the gear lights on with the gear switch down, or completely turn off all the lights. So what I did is I did not wire the second the light controller switch for used to turn the lights on and off, and only wired the one that allows the gear to turn on the landing lights on the gear. And the reason is simple. It just means I could use one less channel on my smooth flight, and also just simplify the whole thing. So I'm going to throw up a picture of how those lights are connected on the light controller, and we're going to move on. So if we go into the inside, this is what our setup looks like, and you can see all those wires just coming out from the front, all chafe protected and sheathed correctly, and just going underneath the deck here, and getting worked all the way up to the electronics or the avionics in here, and then whatever needs to go back goes towards the back there. So the other thing I want to point out here is that once I figured out where all my wiring went, I actually went back, and you can see on the edges of these connectors I applied E6000 shoe goop just to keep those connectors in place, because these can vibrate off, but at the same time that is not what I want. But what this E6000 allows you to do is whenever I need to pull this off, then I can actually it's a rubbery sort of glue that can be peeled off, and then I can remove my connectors. But as long as it's attached sort of like that, you can see that those wires are not going anywhere. So like I said, just stacking the deck as much as possible in my favor, especially for something this big. I really don't want things going wrong where connectors come unplugged. So just another thing I wanted to point out when it comes to making sure that your wiring is actually pretty solid. To mention is the key for the plane. So this is how you turn the plane on and off, is through the pin and flag right here. And I like where this is situated because it's sort of in the underside of the plane, so pretty understated, but because everything on this jet tends to be operated from this side, so fuel that's right here, it's going to be very easy to spot if that's in or out. That's pretty much it.